Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. I'm from the lunch break. Council, are we ready with this afternoon's witness? If we are, you may proceed, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As I indicated prior to the break, I would like to admit documents related to the testimony of Mr. Abdukarim Jame. That would be as Exhibit 0074. And they all relate to his medical records, as I indicated earlier. The first one would be 0074, Annex A, which would be the discharge card from RVTH, and it contains information about the dates of his time at RVTH. 0074B would be the medical report that was conducted by the medical board in 2001, 6th of December, and that's a 2-page document. 0074C would be the physiotherapy report of the physiotherapy that the treatment he had in 2000. 0074D would be a report from Dakar, Senegal, regarding the medical treatment that he received there. 004E would be medical report again from Dakar, Senegal in 2014. And then 0074F would be the medical report from the medical board that was constituted following the TRRC's request, and that's dated 27 March 2019. So that's 0074F. Thank you.
Request granted.
Mr. Chair, we are ready to proceed with the next witness. Mariama Singate would lead the witness. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and good afternoon, everyone. Obi Van, can we please have the witness on the screen? Hello, Mr. Witness. My apologies for keeping you till this time. You were supposed to start at 12:30, but you're now starting at 2:15. Before we start, I'd just like to administer the affirmation to you. So you repeat after me. I state your name, please. Do affirm that speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you very much. I'd just like to go over a few house rules before we start. As I had already explained to you, there is simultaneous interpretation going on. So I'll request that you wait for 3 seconds after my corrections before you answer, so as to prevent overlap in our speeches. For today, I want to discuss these topics with you. First, we'll discuss your background information, the events of April 10, 2000, with respect to the position that you were in at that time, your injuries and your personal ordeals while you were at RVTH, and the treatment you received abroad as well. Finally, we'll deal with the impact of the incident on your life and that of your family. So we'll start now. Can you please tell us your full name? When and where were you born? Can you please give us a brief background of your educational background till date?
I attended primary school at St. Charles Luanga in Fajikunda in 91 to 96. Then I went to Gaba Jahumpa in 96 to 99. Then I went to Banjul Academy beginning of January till January 2000 till January till April 2000. Uh, After the event of April 10 and 11 incident. Then I went to Learning Center in Frankfort, Kentucky in 2003 to obtain my GED. In 2003, I went to Kentucky State University till 2005. Then I attended Bluegrass Community and Technical College in 2013 to 2015. So that's my brief educational background.
Thank you very much. What are you currently doing?
I work as an industrial technician.
Going back to year 2000, you mentioned that you were attending Banjul Academy High School, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us where your school was located?
I can't remember the exact address, but it was around St. Augustine's senior and senior secondary school.
Will that be Gambia High School presently?
Now, if I recall correctly, it was in not that close, but it was somewhat in between Gambia High and St. Augustine's.
Can you tell us where you were on the morning of April 10, 2000?
Well, I was on my way to school from home. I was in Latrikunda Saviji at that time. Um, on my way in a school bus to Banjul to go to school. When we arrived at GTTI bus stop, there were some students, not a whole lot, there that stopped school bus and asked us to get out of the bus to join them because they were about to conduct a peaceful protest because of what happened.
Prior to that morning, did you know that a protest was about to take place that day?
I heard about a planned protest by Gamsu, but I didn't know that that day on the April 10th was going to be the date of, for the protest to take place.
And can you please tell us where you heard of this planned protest?
I had it in my neighborhood from friends and some adults.
That morning, was anything significant taking place in your school?
Unfortunately, I didn't make it to school because my school at that time was in Banjul and I only made my way from home to GTTI bus stop anyway.
And where was this GTTI bus stop?
It was directly across, the bus stop was directly across from GTTI campus on the other side of the road, heading from Serekunda, heading towards Banjul, side of the road.
What grade were you in during this time?
Grade 10.
The bus that you were in, was it a school bus or a normal bus?
It was a school bus.
So what happened when a group of students asked you guys to come down from the bus?
Well, they were waiting for subsequent school bus to arrive and do the same. Ask the student to come out of the school bus and join us. So at that time, pretty much, it seems like to me they were waiting for numbers to get enough students to be able to start the peaceful protest.
When they asked the students to come down from the bus, did they tell you the reason why you should come down from the bus?
When I saw them, it occurred to me that actually the planned peaceful protest was going to be that day. So when I get down, there were some students. I'm assuming that some of them were Gamsu leaders who organized this protest, informing us, I guess folks or students who were not aware why they were being asked to come out of the school bus and to join us and to participate in this peaceful protest against the killing of Ibrahim Abari.
As at that time, how many students were gathered around that area?
When my bus stop arrived there, probably about 30 to 50 students. But then over time, as more school buses arrive at that bus stop and more students were asked to join us on the side, the number swelled. So eventually, before we began the demonstration, I can estimate there were probably about maybe 500 students as a rough estimate.
And at what time of the day was this?
This was in the morning. I think my bus arrived at that bus stop around 7 a.m. in the morning, that time frame.
The students that were gathered around that area, did they appear to be organized?
The students that were in charge, they seem organized.
Can you please describe the manner in which they were organized?
Well, whenever they saw a school bus, they would get on the road to make sure that school bus stopped at that bus stop across GTTI. And then they will ask the students to disembark from the bus and join the rest of the students waiting on the side.
After they've gathered much students, what happened?
The group that I was in, we crossed the street and we were on the road from Banjul towards Westfield. And they told us we was gonna march from GTTI towards Westfield. Then we commenced the march. there were some chants calling for justice for Ibrahim Bari, and I also forget to mention that there was an alleged teenage girl that was raped by security personnel. So because of these two incidents, that was the reason for this peaceful protesting.
Did the students carry anything with them at this point?
Yeah, some of them have banners writing justice for, Ibrahim Abari, justice for Binta Mani, I believe. Uh, justice delay is justice denied. Signs like that as far as trying to register grievance and to the government at that time.
As far as you can recall, were the students from one particular school or were there several students from different schools?
There was a diverse students from mostly around the Kanifing area and
You, sorry, you mentioned that you were marching towards Westfield. Can you tell us
yes,
the manner in which you were marching towards Westfield?
we were marching peacefully towards Westville.
While marching towards Westfield, did the students, apart from chanting justice for Ibrahim Abari and holding banners, did the students do anything else?
No, at that point in time, no, we were marching peacefully and orderly towards Westville, saying the calling for justice for these two victims.
As far as you can recall, the, within the crowd itself, was it only students that were marching towards West?
I only saw students. Yes.
Can you please tell us what happened while you were marching?
Um, Actually, if I may go back a little, when my boss stopped arrive at GTTI, there were a few paramilitary on the side, and at that point in time, what they were doing was trying to ensure there was no obstruction of traffic heading towards Banjul. When we started our peaceful marching towards Westfield, it didn't take long before I security formation. Uh, from the best that I can tell, they were all paramilitary officers or personnel, and they were that suggests that they wanted to stop us. But nonetheless, we marched until we get as close as possible to the security formation. They were in full riot gear. They have their helmets and they have their seals.
You mentioned earlier that when your boss stopped, you saw a few paramilitary personnel and they were trying to ensure that the students do not obstruct traffic. The paramilitary personnel that you saw on the ground there, what were they dressed like?
At that time, I didn't see any of them have seals, but some of them have helmets, and they were also carrying batons with them. But they were very few in numbers.
Was this before or after the match? After you've proceeded with the match?
This is before we start the march.
At that point, did they try to engage the students?
At one incident, I saw an officer who seemed to be their commander talking to some of the student leaders or the organizers to make sure that they were not obstructing traffic while they were conducting school buses to stop and ask students to come out to join them.
At that point, did it seem like there was an understanding between the students and the paramilitary officers that were there to ensure that they do not obstruct traffic?
At that point in time, yes, it seemed so.
You also stated that while you were moving towards Westfield, you saw another paramilitary group, but this time they were in a form of a formation. Can you please describe that formation?
Where I was around the middle of the group that was marching. So from my view, I could see maybe about 2 to 3 lines long enough to block the length of the road, and they were in gears. They had their helmets, the seals, and the buttons. I'm not sure how further the line goes behind them, but from where I was, I can tell at least 2 or 3.
Can you recall roughly how many paramilitary personnel were there? The ones in a formation.
The ones I saw probably about 30.
Did they at any point engage the students?
Yes, when the students marched until they were close enough, they tried to stop. They tried to stop us, and I think there was a push and pulling. Uh, the student wanted to continue the march almost by any means, and the security forces were determined to stop us. So that push and pulling end up with the security forces, the paramilitary, starting to assault the students, especially the ones who were in the front of the line on the peaceful demonstration.
You said the students wanted to proceed with the march almost by any means. Can you please state what you mean by that?
What I mean, they were just not gonna come and stop us. There was a security formation there, present there, trying to stop us. So we were determined to continue our peaceful marching.
Did the paramilitary in any way try to speak to the student leaders that were there?
Where I was, not that I know of.
Can you please describe the push and pull you're talking about between the students and the paramilitary?
I think I saw some students being pushed by the paramilitary with their seals. Not long after that, then they started the beating, using their batons to beat the students who were closest to them. So that kind of caused some fury, and the student tried to retreat and attack again or continue the march. The same thing happened, and eventually I start seeing tear gas being fired on the students. So with the tear gas, the student retreat, and some of us started stoning the security forces in retaliation.
These stones that was used by the students, did they have it while marching or was it after they were being beaten by the paramilitary?
Yeah, when we started the march, no, I did not see any students. carrying any stone whatsoever beside the banners. So this happened after the security started assaulting us and firing tear gas canisters on us.
The tear gas, was it directly, in which direction was it at?
Tear gas, the tear gas canisters were being directed towards the students.
From the time you started marching, did you see any student carrying any weapons of any sort at all?
Absolutely no.
Where then did the students get the stones that they used on the paramilitary personnel?
We get the stones on the side of the road, and if it wasn't as if there was an abundance of stone available, so we just try to be resourceful. So it wasn't like we were raining down stones in retaliation. So there were a few stones available around the side of the road. The stone that I get it from the road.
You mentioned that the paramilitary personnel were beating students. Did you see anyone injured from the beatings?
At that point in time, no.
What happened after they started shooting the tear gas at the students?
So the tear gas, when they started shooting the tear gas, this created certain amount of some distance in between the security personnel and the students. Um, then few minutes later, I heard that the minister was there. The minister was there. I didn't know which minister they were talking about, but later I saw, or not long ago, I saw an individual wearing all white being escorted by the students who were in the front heading towards the paramilitary. And thereafter, it seems like this individual who was wearing all white talked to them, and there was some kind of peace, or the assaulting from the security forces stopped, and the stoning by us, by the students, stopped as well. So I was in close.
My apologies for cutting you. This individual that you're referring to as the minister, do you know who he was at that time?
At that time, no.
Did you later know who he was?
Yes. It was the ex-Minister of Interior, Usman Baji.
How did you come to know that he was Usman Baji?
Real quick, so Usman Baji was able to talk to the students, even though I was in close proximity to be able to hear him. But the way he was acting and the way the student leaders were behaving, obeying his commands, it seems like we retreated back to the GTTI campus. So in hindsight, it seemed like he was able to tell the students to go inside GTTI campus.
My question actually was, how did you know that the minister you're referring to was called Usman Baji?
Okay. Yeah, the reason why I mentioned that, because I was able to, I'm not getting any feedback. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can't hear you. Sorry. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. It seems like you can hear me, but I can't. All right. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me loud and clear now? Great.
Yes.
Do you want me to repeat my previous question?
No, I think I understand you well.
Okay.
So the reason I was able to find Mr. Usman Baji is because when we retreated inside GTTI campus, he was in at the front of the campus entrance talking to some of the students who I assume again are either GAMSU leadership or they were in charge of the peaceful demonstration where I was. So I made my way in front as close as possible. The campus was full of students, at least at the front. Initially, I was in the front, but I made my way up front as close as possible. So roughly maybe about 7 yards where I was, that's when I was able to identify this was Mr. Usman Baji, the ex-Minister of Interior. And I know who he was. I seen him on TV, on the news numerous times. And on one particular occasion, I met him at Nema, at a Gamo. I live in Latir Kunda Sabiji, and Nema is behind Latir Kunda Sabiji. And that's where I usually go to perform my Friday prayers. So there was a Gamo, he was a guest there.
For how long did he have that interaction with the student leaders?
Maybe I estimate about 15 minutes at most.
And did he succeed in diffusing the situation?
No, unfortunately, it actually escalated. Um, like I said, when I made my way close to the front line at the entrance of the campus, um, I got as close as possible. I couldn't hear what they were saying where I was, but I was able to see and sense the frustration in the negotiation between the minister and the students. So at that point, I put two and two and said, this is not going to work out because of the body language, their demeanor. I mean, there was more frustration in the body language than agreement. And behind the minister and the students that were negotiating with him, there was a formation of paramilitary officials. It seems like the previous paramilitary formation that we came into contact with followed us behind the minister. So they were behind the minister on a standby position. So I started retreating because I expect it's just a matter of time before something bad happened, as in the security of paramilitary assaulting us or attacking us. And unfortunately, that's what ended up happening. So as I was retreating or backing up further, that way I can avoid danger. I was going back and looking back towards the front just to see what's going on and how things are going to unfold. I was looking back and trying to dig my way through the crowd of students to head back. I think I turned around back and forth at least 3 times. The third time I turned around to look at the front of the entrance, campus entrance, I clearly saw Mr. Usman Baji gesturing by pointing to the security formation to attack the students. So he gestured for the security forces to attack us in the campus, inside the campus.
Before dealing with that, I'd just like to take you back a little bit. That is at the time when the minister was having the conversation with the students. Was he the only senior officer present there at that time, official present?
No, I'm glad you asked that question. Uh, when I made my way at the close to the entrance of the campus, prior to backing up because of potential danger, I was also able to identify the former CDS Babukar Jada, and I think some people call him Babukar Vincent Jada. And there was also two senior military officials, soldiers, whom I do not know, but they were also present.
Did you know this former CDS Babukar Vincent Jatta prior to that day? Did you know him?
I know of him. I never met him in person prior to that, but I knew who he was. I know of him.
Did he also have any interaction with the students?
When I saw him, for the most part, he was standing, and I think maybe an orderly was standing beside him. He seemed to let the minister take in charge at that point in time. So he was somewhat behind the minister.
This Babukar Vincent Jatta you're talking about, is he also known as Vincent Jatta?
Yes, he is called by both names.
Can you please describe him?
Even if I see him today, even after all these years, I'll be able to identify him. Um, I saw him on the TRC as a witness previously. Um, I don't know exactly when, probably about 3 weeks ago.
The one that
Oh,
testified before the commission was the former CDS Babukar Jatta. Is that the person you're referring to that you saw that day in the crowd?
exactly.
Now you mentioned that you saw the minister Baji gesturing. Can you please describe how and what he was doing?
Yeah, prior to that, he was very frustrated with the students. So whatever he was trying to negotiate with the student leaders, um, they were not either listening or obeying, or they did not agree with him through his body language. So when I was
At that point, were the students acting in any way aggressive towards him?
no, so the students were at the campus, and few students who I assume were part of the GAMSU leadership or executive body. There was probably maybe a 5 yard gap where the students were and where the ex-minister Usman Baji was with about 5 students negotiating.
Can you please, if you can demonstrate how he was gesturing for the paramilitary to attack?
So close to the laptop. So give me a minute. So as if the security formation is where my hand is, or let me use the other hand. If I can get this right. So he pointed to them and motioned his hands towards the students who are inside the campus. So I hope that described it well. So he gestured for the security formation to attack us by pointing his hand to the security official first, the security formation. Then he motioned his hands to go after the students. And that's what they did precisely.
And did they obey his command when he did that?
Sadly, yes.
Can you please tell us how?
Well, he made way. As soon as he did that, he got out of the way, the entrance, and then the security started moving. At that point, it created a stampede inside the campus. So students started to flee for safety. I turned my back at that point. When I saw the security moving in, I tried to get away as far as possible and as soon as possible. But there was a stampede. Um, in fact, there is a mark around my upper right. There is a scar that I get there because I was very close to the fence on the right. Because of that stampede, my body was rocked and my head hit the side of the wall, and it caused a scar on the upper side of my right eye.
Can you please describe how the paramilitary were moving towards the students?
They had their batons, um, and they were attacking. As soon as I saw them, I turned, and I wasn't looking back. I was trying to get away as soon as possible. They were attacking us. They were almost running towards the students. You are attacking somebody.
Can you describe how they were attacking? You said they were attacking. What were they doing to the students?
Uh, they were assaulting the students, and I say that because once I was able to get away from the stampede of crowd of students, I entered a building, classroom buildings, and I saw some students going upstairs, and I followed them. I went upstairs. When I was upstairs, I was able to have a view around the entrance of the campus. So I saw them beating the students with batons. There was also a girl that I saw who was being assaulted, beaten with batons, and kicked by a paramilitary official. I mean, being beaten mercilessly. You can hear the cries, student crying, both male and female students.
At this point, were you the only one in that particular classroom?
No, it was about maybe 8 of us uh, when we went upstairs. As soon as I saw how that particular paramilitary official was beating and kicking that poor girl, I was in terror. I immediately entered the classroom, and in there, few more students joined us before we closed the door and barricaded it with tables, classroom tables.
How did you feel in that classroom with the rest of your colleagues?
It was terrifying, um, especially the classroom directly below us. It seems like they beat students and arrest as much as they could, and after that, they were going from one classroom after another classroom, going after students and beating them and probably arresting them too. The classroom directly below us was quiet, but suddenly you can hear the noise and then the cries begin. So they entered the classroom and started beating the students who were seeking refuge in the classroom directly.
From where you were, can you please tell us if you've observed any student attacking any officer?
No, it was like the victim and the perpetrator. The security forces were the perpetrators and the students were the victim.
How long did you remain in that classroom?
I don't know exactly. It's been a long while, but an estimate probably about maybe 25, 30 minutes.
Can you tell us
And
what
then
happened
after,
after that?
yeah, after a while, the commotion, the beating, the crying went off. For a little while after that commotion calmed down, and some of the students in the class that I was, they suggested that maybe they are gone. Let's flee. Let's get out of here. So we cautiously take the table that were barricaded in the classroom door, and we cautiously looked to see nobody was around, especially the security forces, and we kind of hide to get out. That way, when we are escaping, if there were any security, if there were any paramilitary or any security forces, they won't see us and to successfully escape. So
You mentioned that while inside the classroom, you had students crying and shouting. Can you tell us what you
yes.
observed when you got outside the classroom? Did you see any students around and in what condition? Sorry, did you see any students around?
No, I did not see any student around apart from the group that I was with in the classroom. However, we were not trying to look to see, to have a good observation what happened, who is where. We were kind of hiding to avoid being seen potentially by the paramilitary.
Were you successful in hiding from the paramilitary?
Yes, we were able to get downstairs, go to the rear of the campus, and I think we climbed a fence. But anyway, we were able to get out of the campus, escape the campus from around the rear area. And after we get out of the campus, outside of the campus, then I saw students on the streets, uh, shock in terror, people fleeing. Uh, I mean, it was confusing. Uh, for example, when we get out of the campus, we were trying to head away from the campus as far as possible. But the direction that we were heading, there were also some students coming from that direction, and it seems like they were from danger from that direction as well. So it was terrifying and confusing. Some students I saw were seeking shelter at the compounds around the GTTI campus. But personally, I felt like the farther I get away from the campus, the better.
You mentioned that the Austrians moving from the direction that you were heading towards were fleeing from danger. Can you tell us what kind of danger that was?
I'm not sure, but I would assume they were fleeing from danger from security personnel.
At that point, did you see any security personnel around?
No, at that point in time, no. I only saw students fleeing.
Can you recall what location you were in at that time?
Okay, if you are facing the campus, if you are inside the campus looking outside on the street on the right, that's where I was. But around the back area, though,
And did you remain there?
no, no. We quickly found the group I was with. Some of us stayed together, maybe about five of us out of maybe eight or nine. We found a safe part, a straight back road to take that led us all the way to a street, to the Jimpek Street. Not the front, but maybe towards Canifing. I'm sorry, I haven't been to Gambia since I came to the US, so you have to forgive me. Uh, but anyway, the street that we used after we escaped GTTI campus, we came out of Jimpek. Hopefully that's the street name. But if you take that street heading towards the Banjul Serakunda Highway, you will come out of Jimpex, in front of Jimpex. So that's the street that we came out at. Uh, we were conscious of trying to avoid the main roads because we thought most likely the paramilitaries will be at the main mining checkpoint whatsoever. So we were using the back roads as much as possible to escape. And the feeling that I was feeling at that time was I felt like I was under siege. We used the Jimpex Road to use another road where the Gambia Public Transportation Headquarters is located at. We used that road also after that to come out of the road where Iceman is located.
During the time you were trying to find your way, did you encounter any security personnel?
Fortunately, no, but we were intentionally trying to avoid that. So no, we didn't see any at that point.
What did you observe while you were trying to find your way? What could you observe on the street?
A feeling of eerie, strange, you know, almost like being at a war zone, like danger could come from anywhere. I mean, this is something I never witnessed before in my life. And growing up as a kid in Gambia, I have heard numerous stories of the paramilitary, as they are commonly called in Gambia, paras. They were very notorious torturers. So I heard of people who they beat the hell out of. Excuse my language. Um, yeah, even at sport venues like football matches, um, if you come to a part where something was wrong, if you roughen their feathers, um, I feel sorry for you.
So prior to this day, you already had rumors of the brutality of the paramilitary, and as such, you were fearful of them. Did you make your way back home while you were still around that area?
The intention was to escape danger, immediate danger, at least at that time. No, I never made it home. Uh, when we came out at the street where Iceman was, um, excuse me, we used that street to come to Serakunda Banjul Highway, so in front of the Iceman factory. Uh, we were in a fearful mode, kind of like hiding mode, also walking towards the end of the road on the side wall as far as possible. We didn't know when we get to the highway what we will find. To our relief, when we get to the end of the Iceman Street that connects to the Banjul Serakunda Highway, we saw a group of students in front of the police mobile unit. I think it's this kind of thing. So we immediately joined that group of students. At least to my relief, I wasn't by myself. There were a bunch of colleagues uh, out there protesting, and at that time, uh, the students were just there, were angry demeanor, but protesting peacefully in front of the police mobile unit.
Can you please describe the atmosphere around the police mobile units? What were the students doing?
The students seem very serious. Um, I'm not sure what was the objective there, protesting in front of the police mobile unit rather. But for me, it was the closest place to go for to feel safe, at least at that point in time.
Did anything happen while you were at the police mobile unit?
Yes, almost as soon as we joined the group, at least I started seeing tear gas that's been fired on us. Uh, I'm not sure exactly at that position, but it was it was coming around the police mobile unit there. It was coming from there, around there at least. And then we, the students, again retaliated by stoning back after they started shooting tear gas canisters on us. And I'm assuming where I was, I did not actually see any security official firing, but I believe it was the paramilitary or some sister security officials.
Apart from the paramilitary, did you see any other security outlet where you were?
Where I was, no, only paramilitary personnel.
After they started shooting tear gas at the group of students that were gathered there, what happened?
We retaliated by stoning again. then the intensity of tear gas kind of grew. And I guess being cautious at that time, I thought actually it's probably best for me to Red Cross headquarters. It wasn't far away from there. And at that point, I was an active member of the Red Cross Society. And I have been to the Red Cross headquarters several times. Um, so I proceeded to go there. But almost halfway there, I saw some students fleeing from that area, from the Westfield area, coming towards us. And I was able to hear them tell me, no, 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 don't go over there. Paras are there, paras are there. So I turned around and joined them and head back to where I came from. The group of students who were being shot at with tear gas, and the student retaliating by shooting, stoning them. Um, Even before I actually make my way to the back of that crowd of students, that was the first time I heard sounds of gunshots. Then immediately the students start scattering, running. For some reason, um, I felt that they were shooting rubber bullets or blank bullets, maybe to scare the students. That's actually what I believed at that point in time. When the students start scattering, I was kind of naive, saying, "Oh, in my head anyway, at least it's rubber bullets. You know, it's rubber bullets." Uh, I turn around, try to jog a little bit, uh, and turn around and look, but it's like the students are like running like for their lives. And again, I kind of felt like they were just shooting rubber bullets. So, I wasn't terribly worried or scared. So I was jogging back and looking back, but to see if maybe the student would stop running. But almost all the students seemed to me like, compared to me, seems like they were running for their lives. So as I was running back and looking back to see what's going on, like, are we stopping? Um, I think the last time, I can't remember how many times I was running and looking back, running away and looking back towards the direction of the front of the police mobile unit. But the last time I looked back, I saw a student holding his hand. Um, he was shot on one of his hands. I can't remember which one. Um, but he was using his hands, one of his hands that was in shot, to hold the other hand that was shot. But the hand was so terribly hit with a bullet that his hand was dangling. As he didn't hold it with his other hand to support it, it was gonna fall off. So it was at that point in time that I knew they were in fact shooting live rounds.
You mentioned that you had shots earlier. As at the time you had the shots, did you know at that point that it was gun shots that were being fired at the student?
It initially it was a sound of it, At that point, I did not know that there were certain live rounds, but I assumed that there were certain rubber bullets or blank shots.
Did you see the people that were shooting at the students?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Did you see where the shots were coming from?
I didn't see, but I just hear. But judging from how the students in the mobile unit were scattering, it was coming from around that area, E- either the either from the police mobile unit inside or the building next to it.
So, what happened when you saw this student holding his hand and running?
Well, it confirmed to me that I was terribly wrong, and immediately at that point, I started sprinting, uh, running for my life in terror. Um, Within few steps, I felt like something penetrated my stomach, and I terribly weak and started having breathing trouble, severely breathing trouble, and I almost fell down. I looked at my stomach to see if I got shot too, but I didn't see any blood. When I look at my stomach, um, I was wearing a white uniform, so if I was bleeding, I felt like I would have seen the blood. So I used one of my hands to feel my stomach to see if I would touch any blood, but I did not. So somehow I felt like maybe it's something else, but I was in shock. I can't see, I didn't see any blood. I didn't feel any blood. So I tried to force myself to run.
Do take your time, please. Are you okay to continue?
Yeah, I would like to.
Go ahead, please.
So, excuse me, I tried to force myself to run, but I could not. So I almost collapsed. And the only reason why, because I kind of leaned towards the wall, my left, for support or to prevent me from collapsing. I took a few steps and then fell down. So when I fell down, I could see the students most running and passing me, trying to save their life as well. So I leaned there trying to imagine, wow, I can't believe actually these guys, they would actually shoot us, try to kill us. And in fact, that's what they were doing, killing unarmed school children.
At that point, you have mentioned that you did not see any blood or feel that you were injured. What were you feeling at that time?
Well, right before I fell down, when I didn't feel anything, I tried to force myself to keep running, but I could not. The way I was feeling, I was feeling incapacitated, so much so that even though I did not see or feel any blood, I knew I was shot for a fact.
For how long did you remain lying down there?
Not long, probably about maybe 10 minutes. Um, I realized that where I was laying down was far, little bit far for in case any rescuing come, if any rescue showed up. Where I was laying down, it occurred to me that they may not see me. So, to increase my chances of being seen and rescued, hopefully, I knew I had to somewhere closer where I would be more visible. So I tried to get up, but I stumbled and fell. But I forced myself. I even crawled because the way I was feeling, I knew if I did not get to a hospital very soon, it will be the end of me. So I crawled my way till the middle of the lane dividers and lay down there, hoping to be rescued. Fortunately, I started feeling unconscious, but fortunately, in my view where I was laying down, I saw two men carrying somebody who I suppose was a student, injured student. Later, a man was standing around me, or almost on top of, was standing beside me, yelling to another man to come. I'm assuming so that they can pick me up, rescue me. But before the other man joined the first man that came to me, I had them yelling, trying to catch the attention across the street. So I turned around, try to see what was going on. Immediately after I turned around, I saw a Red Cross ambulance passing. So the men were trying to wave the ambulance to stop and rescue me or any other students who was shot around me. Um, but the ambulance wasn't stopping. And when it went past me on the back of the ambulance, Red Cross ambulance, the side doors were open and there were two Red Cross members with the Red Cross emblems hanging on the hanging on the side doors. And I could see what appeared as lifeless bodies on the back of the ambulance. And the Red Cross volunteers were waving off the two men who were trying to get their attention, as in, no, 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 we can't stop. We are too full. At least that's how they were gesturing. To my dismay, I kind of lost hope. I felt like, man, that was it. And, I miss out. But, but anyway, when the ambulance passed the back of the ambulance, there were bodies lying there. And the bodies to me appeared like they were lifeless bodies. At least two hands were hanging outside the rear of the ambulance door, and at least one body was on top of another. So they went past me. To my disappointment, but the other men joined the first man that came to me, and they took my shirt off, and they carried me and loaded me in a private vehicle. Inside the vehicle, there were already students um, with their shirt taken out. But I can tell they were students because of the pants that they were wearing. And they were young, about my age. So they load me in the car, close the door, and they get in the front and they drove off heading towards Banjul. Um, Inside the car, in the back of the car, three of us, um, one of the students who was sitting directly behind the passenger seat, front passenger seat, was in severe pain and crying. And the student in the middle or in between us didn't say anything. When I looked, you see his body, his abdomen, riddled with bullets, wounds that appear as exit wounds. It was so sad that I even forgot about my plight. He wasn't making any movement or noise. Um, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know any of them. But I hope he made it. And if he did, it'll be miraculous, given how his abdomen was riddled with bullets. I looked at my stomach and saw a wound. So that was the first time I saw the bullet that struck me, and I was bleeding. So I took one of my hand and placed it on the wound to minimize the bleeding. We drove all the way to Denton Bridge, and I saw a heavily armed checkpoint, military checkpoint. They stopped our vehicle. The men quickly pointed at us in the back, and when the soldiers peeked and they saw us, they quickly make way and they let us pass, and we head towards Banjul. So when we entered Banjul, that's when I started losing consciousness. Um, Pretty much at that point, I couldn't describe anything accurate. But I was assuming that we were going to Royal Victoria Hospital, RVH. Um, I couldn't see anything at that time, but I could feel something. Um, when we arrived at the hospital, or what at least at that point, what I was assuming is a hospital, I didn't know. But I could feel that I was being unloaded. I was being carried by hands and moving. Few moments later, I felt that I was being laid down on a towel. I could feel it was a little bit chilly. And that was it. I almost went into sleep.
Can you recall the time you were being transported to Banjul? Was it because you mentioned that it started off in the morning? So the time you were being transported to Banjul, can you estimate what time it was then?
No.
The two students you were referring to that were in your vehicle, did you see them again?
I didn't recognize them at that point. If I have seen them again, I wouldn't even know they were the one.
Can you recall where you were taken when you went to the hospital?
No. I was conscious at that point in time. I couldn't even see. The only thing at that time was my sense of feeling. I could feel like if I felt that I was being carried. Where, by who, I didn't know.
How long did you
But
remain
because,
in that? My apologies.
but
For how long did you
go
remain
ahead.
in that state of unconsciousness?
I don't know. Um, Sorry, I hope I'm not speaking too fast from your responses. No, I didn't know. Uh, but at some point, I felt an intense heat on my body, and I believe or I knew that uh, surgery was being performed. I was having surgery, so it felt like if the overhead surgery lamp, I was under it. Um, I could feel and I could reason. somewhat. I couldn't see, I couldn't tell where I was by sight. And that was the last thing I remembered until a few days later when I woke up at the ICU.
At the ICU, were you the only victim from the incident that was there?
No, unfortunately, um, I came to know of Yusuf Ambai. He was shot on the neck. He was there. Um, I didn't know all the students who were there, but I know of Yusufa. And there was another patient. I can remember at this point in time if he was a student, but his name was Francis. Unfortunately, I don't remember his last name, but his name was Francis. He was also there. And unfortunately, there was I believe, a 3-year-old baby. I'm not sure if he was a boy or a girl, but I'm assuming he was a boy. He was also there with us, and he was shot in the head, and he was suffering daily because the bullet was in his head, and they couldn't take it out. And that baby was suffering every day. It was terrible.
I'm deeply sorry that I'm making you relive this horrific moment that has passed.
It's okay. It's not easy, but
Do you need some time?
it's okay. I'll try to pause on voluntarily. Um, we, the Gambian, to hear from us. We need to know what happened and what the face of terror looks like.
For how long did you remain in the ICU?
I'll say about 3 weeks. I can't remember for sure, but about that time frame, 2 to 3 weeks. Um, I really wish I could capture in words the suffering of his poor baby and his parents who were so helpless. Yusuf Mbai, how he was gasping for air constantly. Yeah, but what wouldn't do justice? It's almost impossible to capture. Yeah,
The 3-year-old you're referring to, did he make it?
I'm not sure. And I get so emotional about him. Again, I'm not 100% if it was a he or she, but I'm assuming it was he. He was later taken to Dakar because, unfortunately and very sadly for him, the hospital didn't have the resources or maybe a neurosurgeon to perform the operation and remove the bullet from his head. So I think the last time I heard, they took him to Dakar. I just hope no parents would ever have to experience such a thing. Yeah, yeah, I'll try to move on because the baby I experienced at the ICU was very, and it breaks my heart every time. Almost impossible to talk about without breaking down.
During the time at which you were taken to the hospital and the time you spent at the ICU, were your parents aware that you were there?
Yeah, they were aware. Um, I was told a story afterwards when I was relocated from the ICU to another ward called 6 and 7. That one of my uncles, who was a nurse and who somehow he was working at MRC. Somehow he was at RVH at that day. Um, he had that what happened, and they needed people to donate blood. So he went to donate blood, and was helping some of the hospital staff, doctors, nurses. But I was told this story. Of course, at that time, I was unconscious, very unconscious, beside my sense of feeling. Um, I think that's, and maybe reasoning, true feelings. Um, Pretty much that was it at that point in time. But long story short, um, either after donating blood or before, he was helping them move bodies, supposedly dead bodies of students. And when they get to me, or anyway, somehow he recognized me because I made a motion and said that this kid is not dead, he's still alive. And then when they turn around, they recognize me. He recognized me. So I think it was at that point that I was rushed to the theater room.
So if it had not been for your uncle who arrived on time and recognized you, you would have been counted among the ones that they presumed dead.
Precisely, and my uncle's name is Sirif Job, but he's commonly called Sirif Njai.
After spending about 2 to 3 weeks in the ICU, did your condition improve with that of Yusufa that was at the ICU as well? And this Francis you referred to.
Yeah, before I answer that, to complete answering your previous question, so my uncle was able to inform my parents that, I was one of the victims when I was there. So after my surgery, something like that. Um, Sorry, could you repeat your question?
My question was that after spending about 2 to 3 weeks at the ICU, did your condition improve and that of Yusuf's as well?
For me, first, yes, I improved enough for the doctor to judge that, they could move me out of the intensive care unit. For Yusufa, the gaps in of air he was doing improved somewhat. So he was gasping for air almost constantly before, and over time it gotten better. His ability to breathe uh, improved slightly.
By the time you were being moved from the ICU to the main ward, were your parents there?
Yeah, occasionally they would let my mom come in for, and then she would leave. But at the ICU, it was very restricted. So there was probably an hour window for visiting.
You have given us the names of the people that were at the ICU. When you were moved to the main ward, did you see other students that were injured there?
Yes, at 6 and 7, there were also some students who were admitted. Um,
Can you
I used to
recall?
know one, I used to know one of them because he was beside me, and he was also shot on the stomach. And I believe his first name was Islamin. I can't remember his last name. He was light skinned. Yeah, but he was beside me with his father, and I was there with my mom. Yes, there were also other students. The ward wasn't completely full of students, but probably half of the patients there were students. I didn't know all of them, but Lamin was next to me, so, and he was also shot in the stomach.
Can you recall roughly about how many students were in that ward?
To estimate, the ward had about maybe 30 beds, so about 15, half of it were students.
As far as you can recall, can you please describe some of the injuries you saw on some of the students?
Um, I could only describe Lamin's because he was closest to me. He was shot somewhere in the abdomen, and he was having complication, and he was bleeding blood frequently. And I actually doubt that he ended up making it, unfortunately. And the condition I was still, you really have to be me for me to be able to tell what your condition was. So beside Lamin, I can't really remember uh, the rest of the students, their injuries in details.
At the RVTH, did you receive the required treatment needed for your injuries?
Well, this is like yes and no question. Um, I was actually shocked that, how I was shot. Uh, they were able to perform surgery to save my life. Yeah, I was actually shocked. to, to compliment it actually. I was shocked that they were able to do that. Um, but when I was transferred from ICU to 6 and 7 ward, unfortunately, I had a very terrible infection. And at that point, I knew, not only at that point, but later on, because of the severe complication, the infection, um, the terrible pain, yeah, I knew I needed help somewhere else with better and more resources.
Can you please help us just get a picture of where the bullet passed through your body?
Okay. So I was shot in the back, and the bullet entered from my back to my right kidney, and it destroyed my right kidney and went through my liver and ruptured my duodenum and my gallbladder. So during surgery, my right kidney was removed. My doctor's Salakos, he said half of my liver was also removed, but because of my age at that time, my liver would grow. My gallbladder was removed, and my duodenum was repaired. But with that's where my infection was coming from. Because after that, they had to insert a tube that is attached with a plastic container, like a vacuum container. Um, the tube was inside my stomach, collecting fluids that was leaking and causing me terrible, terrible pain. So when the tube container gets full, they would replace it. I think they would do that almost daily. And it was a terrible smell replacing that. I felt bad for the nurses. Um, I can't enough express and thank to them, my doctors, the nurses.
Thank you very much. I'll get back to you later. Um, Looking at the time right now, it's already past 4 p.m. I need to seek for permission. Mr. Chairman, may I proceed with the witness? Thank you very much. Can you please speak up a little bit because I'm finding it really difficult to hear you sometimes.
Okay.
Thank you. You were telling us about your condition, as at the time you were transferred from the ICU to the main ward. You've explained that you had a serious infection and as a result, they had to put a pipe through your stomach to extract fluid. During the time you were at the main ward, did you receive any visitors from the government?
Yes, actually, while I was at the ICU, um, Yaya Jame came for a visit, and
My
I
apologies, Assan.
remember.
You have to wait so that I will consult with the OV band to see if they can increase the volume a little bit because I'm struggling to hear you. OB Van, can you please help us with the volume?
How
Hassan,
about
can you
now?
please continue so that I'll see if I can hear you clearly from the headset? Thank you.
Yeah, before I was moved from 6 and 7, from the ICU to 6 and 7, yeah, Jame came for a visit. Uh, and I remember him shaking my hand, probably saying few stuff or few things and moving on. That's all I remember. Um, when I was at 6 and 7, also, I remembered Fatoumata Jahumpa Sise coming there. I remembered, I think at that time, the permanent secretary, the Minister of Health, Dr. Gassama. Yeah, actually, he came there several times to visit me, to visit us.
We have heard evidence that the head of state at that time did visit while you were at the hospital. Can you please confirm this?
Yes, when I was at I saw him at the ICU.
Can you tell us what he did when he came to the ICU?
It looked like he was going from bed to bed, greeting students. Um, I can't remember what he personally said to me, but I remember him shaking my hand, say, saying something that I can't remember now, and moving on to the next bed. And I think the next bed to me was that baby.
How long was it after your admission at the ICU? How long was it before his visit?
I don't remember exactly. Maybe in the first week that I was there, or the second week.
Did he give you any assurance as to your situation that he would take care of you?
I can't remember what he said. Only thing I remember was he said something. I just can't remember what was that.
As at the time of his visit, were your parents there?
No, I did not remember. No, only the doctors and the nurses and the team he came with, and with some journalists. I think GRTS was there.
You've told us that when you were transferred to the main ward, you had a severe infection. Was anything done about the infection?
Yeah, eventually, because it was caused me excruciating pain, terrible pain. To the point that I don't even want to be alive. But over time, I mean, this was going on. I would feel good for 2 days, and a few days later, the pain would come. So this went for almost about a month. Eventually, my good doctor, Dr. Salako, decided to perform a second operation on me to resolve that issue. I remember he was gonna take me to the theater, but there was some kind of miscommunication. There was already a patient there, so he opted to do it at my hospital bed. So they brought in some screen around my bed, and he explained to me what he was gonna do, that I will be conscious, but he would numb my stomach and proceed to perform the operation. I'll be able to see everything. He told me very professionally and asked me if that was okay. Yeah, I said yeah. So see, he went ahead, numbed my stomach, and started cutting my stomach while I was watching. He asked if I was feeling any pain. I said no. So he went ahead, opened my stomach, very graphic. Um, I could see my intestines inside my stomach. Um, he went and did his thing, plunging his hands inside my stomach. That was just stunning. But yeah, I was definitely not prepared for that. But to his credit, he's so professional. I think he suspect that this is really overwhelming. So he remained so calm that it calmed me down. So I just took it. So he did his thing. I think stitch. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he was looking for. I think it was my deodium to seal the leaking. I believed. Um, and when he got done, he stitched back my stomach and closed it. I was in terrible pain the next day, but thereafter, I started feeling a lot better. At least those excruciating pains almost went away.
Before he asked if he can perform the surgery, were your parents informed about this?
Yeah, they were knew about it.
How about the rest of your colleagues? Can you tell me at this stage if they were still at the hospital with you?
Yeah, I think most of the students were downstairs. 6 and 7 is upstairs, and I believe 3 and 4 was downstairs. And I believe majority of the students at RBH were in that ward 3 and 4. I know Sani was there, and I think Abdul Karim and Lamin Toure, they were among the students who were in that ward, I think.
After the doctor performed this surgery, were you well enough to go back home?
No, unfortunately, far from it. Um, it minimized the excruciating pain I was enduring. Um, but no, I could barely walk. I could stand upright. Um, and I had my stomach was open for the second time. And just to go back real quick, when I was at ICU, I didn't even know I was also So I saw the nurses when I was at ICU dressing my left arm. That's when I knew that something was wrong with it. I was wondering why. I was thinking. I mean, I was shot in my stomach. I mean, what's wrong with my hand? Why they keep dressing my hand? Obviously, at this time at ICU, I was in a very fragile state. I was fighting for my life. But eventually, I came to learn that I was also shot on my left arm. Fortunately, the blood penetrated clean. It just went through skin. Mm, yeah,
So, in fact, you had two bullet wounds, one on your hand and the other one in your stomach, correct?
right. Yes.
During the time you were at RVTH, were you at any point discharged or asked to go back home?
Incredibly, yes, and very prematurely. Uh, when I was asked to go, when I was being asked, or at least when a doctor from Cuba, I was told from a Cuban doctor was trying to prematurely discharge me from the hospital. I did not even have my second surgery then. Um, and very quickly, I learned that it wasn't because of a medical decision. It was because they were trying to create rooms to admit some other patients. And it wasn't only me. There were some other students too who they were trying to discharge. And I say prematurely because it was a cause and effect scenario. They were trying to discharge us, or some of us, to explain it better because I later came to find out that the Gambian soldiers were being trained by some Guinea-Bissau soldiers on mortar firing. And unfortunately, an accident happened. There was some kind of denotation, and I think at least one of them died, and some of them suffer serious injuries. You know, shrapnels hit them. So when they brought them to RVH, uh, that time the hospital was full of students, almost out of capacity because of the April 10 and 11 incident. So to make room to admit these soldiers, they tried to prematurely discharge some of us. And I look at it as if the soldiers' lives were more valuable than the students.
And how did you come to know about this information?
I think I was informed by family, and it was also on the news. And to contact later, there were two soldiers from Guinea-Bissau who were admitted at the ward that I was at, 6 and 7.
Can you tell us for how long you remained at the RVTH after the incident of April 10?
About 2 months. About 2 months.
Did you receive any other treatment after that 2 months?
No, my medical condition kind of got stagnant, and I was evacuated to Egypt along with Seni Senghor for further medical treatment.
Can you please tell us what you mean by your medical treatment got stagnant?
Uh, I also had another infection afterward. It wasn't as severe as the first one, but it was very frustrating. It was like taking 3 steps forward and take 5 steps backwards. So I'll get better and then get worse, get better, get worse. So I was in my medical healing wasn't progressing.
When you were transferred to Egypt, did you have any adult that accompanied you to Egypt?
Yes, we went with a nurse called Jula, and she was very helpful.
Aside from the nurse, did any other medical personnel follow you to Egypt?
No, from the best that I can remember, I went with Seni and Jula to to Egypt.
From your explanation, you told us that it's you and Seni that were transferred to Egypt. Can you tell us why you and Seni from the lot that were injured?
That was a government decision, and um, while I was at 6 and 7, at that time it seems like Fatoumata Jahumpa Sise was the phase of the government response to the event of April 10 and 11. Um, I seen her on TV uh, informing the public how the government was responding to care for us, and they said they were going to evacuate the most critically injured students, and and it was based on our medical reports.
Since we are running out of time, can you please briefly explain your experience in Egypt?
Yeah, in Egypt, when I get there, uh, I started the treatment, and fortunately, with the medicines and their treatment, I responded very well to their treatment. I mean, very quickly, uh, my infection was gone, and I was able to walk over time. Normally, stand upright and walk upright. Prior to that, I couldn't do that, and they thought I would need a second surgery, but luckily, I didn't end up needing it. Uh, but I was recovering, taking a bunch of medicines daily, along with Sani and Yusufa. After a month, our doctor, a wonderful doctor, a wonderful human being, Dr. Baha Corona, he's an Egyptian. He told us that um, he's having problems getting in touch with the authorities in Gambia, the government, or whoever on behalf of the government. And they only paid a single month for our medical treatments. And he's trying to get them to pay our subsequent medical bills. But he was it was to no avail. Uh, Fortunately for us, um, they didn't send out send us out of the hospital, either directly or indirectly. They kept us there and continued the treatment while he was trying to get the Gambia government or the representative on the government behalf to make the payment, to make our payments, and rightly so. But that never happened. Um, it was a little bit tough. Jula was there with us for like a week, and she left because that was what was prescribed to her by the government and her air ticket. Um, it was challenging, but we work as a team, try to help each other, be there for one another. Um, I was the most mobile out of the three. I'll try to do what I can as much as possible to help, especially with Yusufa. He was shot at the neck, like I said earlier, and he was paralyzed. And he was almost 100% dependent. What, or at least what I feel like he needed was 100% care. And nurse be there almost round the clock daily to provide adequate care for him. But that wasn't the case. Uh, Eventually, I think about maybe a month or maybe, yeah, about 3 months, little less, uh, we end up departing Egypt to go back home. So,
Apart from the support from the government, did you receive any other support outside?
yeah, yeah, with all due respect, I wouldn't even call that a support. And I know you don't mean no harm, but it was their obligation. But yes, we did get support from very kind and generous Gambians, especially the ones at the diaspora. Few of them will call us, and I understand that they were making donations to send it to us. Um, and also, there was a Gambian that came to visit us, and he was the only person. Um, and I believe his name was Omar C. At that time, uh, he told us he's a CAF official. He came for a meeting and he knew we were there, so he came to visit us and gave us some money to support.
Can you please briefly describe your journey back home to the Gambia?
Almost a nightmare. Um, we didn't have enough money. The money that we get from the Gambian diaspora, I think, you know, the money I was holding was about $100, and at the airport, seemed like you're having trouble hearing me. Can I go ahead? Yeah, at the Egypt, our trouble started at the Egypt airport, Cairo airport. They wouldn't let us board the plane without paying for Yusufa's wheelchair, and that almost delayed us. And our doctor told us, he gave us some document where we wouldn't need to do that, but they were insisting that we have to pay for it. And I was afraid we didn't have enough money to do that at that point. Um, but they were insistent, and the flight was almost gonna there if we did not pay for his wheelchair. So it ended up costing about almost $100, and that was all the money that we had. We bought the plane. We had a transit through Belgium through Brussels airport, almost about 10 hours or even more than 10 hours. We didn't have any money, and we didn't have anywhere to sleep. We explained our plight to we were to board Brussels airline. We explained our plight to them, and initially they offered us to stay on the bench and sleep on the bench on the hallway in the airport. Yusuf was on a wheelchair, Sani was on crutches, and I was pushing Yusuf around. Um, we told them that, I told them we had medicine, we had to take some medicine, and we need food before, after we take our medicines. I think the best thing they came up with after that was to send us to Brussels Airline, their lodge, where they had video games, they had very comfortable couches. That's the best they could do. And when we get there, we talked to the rep who was there, and he gave us 3 vouchers to go get some food at the cafeteria. We went to the cafeteria. Unfortunately, those vouchers were almost worthless. We couldn't get a meal with those vouchers, but just drinks and maybe candies. And we were stuck at the airport because we didn't have Belgian visas. They wouldn't let us out of the airport. So we were very desperate. And I can't remember who, but we end up coming with contacting the Gambian embassy in Belgium for help. And I called the embassy, and I talked to someone, explained our situation, and they told us somebody will call us back. And briefly, somebody called, and if I recall rightly, he said his name is Omar, and he was the deputy ambassador or the deputy consular. But his first name for sure was Omar, and if I'm to guess, his last name is Trrc. He told us they were almost closed and about an hour away. If we had called sooner, he would have came, no doubt. But because of an hour away and almost closed, he can promise he can make it. But he said he'll make sure we'll get food. So he talked to the Belgium Brussels airline rep. It's been a while. It's been a while, and it's either he ended up coming anyway. But that's what good. It's either he talked to the rep and the rep was able to give us the different vouchers that worth buying a meal, or when he arrived, he took us to the cafeteria. When we get there, we bought our meals, and we started eating, and he wanted to know our situation, our ordeal. So we started explaining our ordeal to him. Um, when it came to my turn, you know, um, I started narrating the story, and I'm an emotional person, especially when it involves injustice, and the amount of indignation, while I was explaining the story to him, broke me down. So I couldn't even eat anymore, and he begged with me to continue eating, but I couldn't. Long story short, He was able to help us get beds at the airport where we were able to sleep while we await for our airplane after our transit, our, at least more than 10 hours of transit time. We were able to take our medicines. And I'm very grateful, and we were very grateful to him for his intervention. He was very supportive, very genuine, and he tried to console us in as much as possible. Uh, he told us he will come the next day to visit before we go, or he will try. Promised, he said he can't promise, but he will do his best to come and bid us a farewell. Um, and he came. Luckily, we didn't think he was going to come because we boarded our airplane, and there was a long delay. We were sitting on the terminal for almost an hour, and he was able to come, enter the plane, and bid us farewell, and told us that he informed the Ministry of Health that we were on our way back to Gambia.
Do you know who provided your air ticket back to the Gambia?
I think the government did, but what they did, I think they bought our tickets in both ways, to and from. As far as our returning trip, it was up for us to select a day, but the ticket were reserved. In other words, I went with Dr. Baha uh, to book those tickets. He took me with him.
Can you please just briefly tell us what happened upon your arrival at the airport?
Yeah, there were two government officials that I knew. The then Chief Medical Officer of RVH, Dr. Maria, and I think his or her assistant or deputy. I was a guy, I can't remember his name. Um, I wasn't very happy with them afterwards because of what happened. It seemed as if they are pretending to care, but they did not. They seem to be more interested in our medical report from Egypt. They would start a conversation, but they would make sure that, yeah, where is your medical report? Where is your medical report? That was their primary focus. So they confiscated our medical from Egypt, and you know, I went home, Sani went home, and I believe Yusufa went to the hospital, was taken to the hospital. And afterwards, tried very hard to obtain a copy of our medical reports from Egypt, but they wouldn't give it to us. My mom and I made numerous visits to Dr. Maria Tujalo office, but they dragged their feet, waste our time and effort. Eventually, we end up getting a copy of those through Dr. Baha in Egypt.
I received a picture of you, Saini, and Yusfa while in Egypt. I shared the picture with you, and you did confirm that the pictures were taken in Egypt. I just need you to look at the pictures once again and confirm it so that I can put it in exhibit. Mr. Chairman, those are the pictures shown on the screen, and these are the printed copies of the pictures.
Yes, those pictures were us, three of us in Egypt, and with Gina. She was a psychotherapist for Yusufa. But if either Sani and I needed any kind of therapy, physical therapy, she was more than willing to help out. Yeah, and that picture as well, it was taken in Egypt. Help Sani and Yusufa.
Thank you very much for identifying the pictures. Mr. Chairman, I would like to put in the pictures in exhibit as exhibit 0075, A and B.
Request granted. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You have clearly identified these pictures, which is 0075A and B. And these pictures clearly show how young the three of you were when you were in Egypt all by yourselves. Can you please confirm the age of yourself, your age, Sainis and Yusufas?
I can certainly confirm my age. I was 17. I can confirm either Yusufa or Sani, but I think they were 17 as well.
Thank you very much. You have explained in detail your personal ordeals and the injuries you suffered. Can you please tell us what impact the incident of April 10 had on your life even after the medical treatments you received?
For the most part, for me, I try not to think about it. Um, um, in the face of blatant injustice, impunity, it was the best way for me to deal with it. Um, the impact that I live with is my chronic ulcer as a consequence. I live with that daily. Um, I have digestive complications. Um, I have to watch out for what I eat. And lately, even things that I used to be able to eat, now when I eat them, troubles me, cause me stomach ache, discomfort, etc. But overall, I feel okay. Um, especially compared to some of my colleagues. Um, yeah, when I think about their plight, um, I don't have anything to complain. I mean, sometimes I even feel guilty for the fact that um, I was fortunate to get out of Gambia, and that alone was very helpful in psychological healing. And in addition to that, I was able to further my education to an extent where I have skills set where I can live off. And even without that, I'm independent, you know, compared to some of my colleagues. Um, Yusuf Ambai is a case in point. So I'm okay given those circumstances.
And who do you feel is responsible for what you and some of your colleagues have been through.
The government and government of the Gambia, or so-called government. I think that's probably the more appropriate way to put it, because I think a true government would never not only cause us the harm that they did to us, innocent school children, but after the aftermath, the politicking that they were doing um, to make themselves look a little better, it's just absurd. So the government is responsible. The just the paramilitary, they were acting on their behalf. They are also responsible as well, was as an entity ultimately. And to make matters worse for me, I mean, this is just one of so many. If this is a tragic incident that happened on the 10th, case closed, but that wasn't even on the 11th. I am not sure. I'm not for sure if some students were also killed on the 11th, but some were shot after the 10th. Seni Senghor was shot on the 11th. So can you even begin to reason with that, let alone try to justify it in whatever ways?
You did share some of your medical records with me. I just need you to confirm if you sent in the medical record that is titled Confidential, The Gambia. And it's dated,
Yes.
that's the proceedings of the medical board, dated the 26th day of April 2000.
Could you provide me either the fax number or the telephone number on that report?
At the end of the report, you have GPB 1808. And it's signed by Dr. Nawar.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong thing. Yes, that's accurate.
You also shared with me the medical report signed by Dr. Ebel Haditaha with reference number REFHE 2000.
Yes, that's also accurate.
The other document is from St. Joseph Hospital.
Yes. Could you provide me any reference number on the document?
With reference number A00995681.
Yes, that's accurate.
Mr. Chairman, the witness having identified the document he sent to me, I'd like to put it in exhibit as exhibit 0076A, B, and C.
Request granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suwareh, for answering all of my questions. I know it has been a very difficult time for you to relive all these moments, but we are grateful that you decided to share your story with the TRRC. Mr. Chairman, the witness is yours now.
Thank you very much, Council. Thank you very much, Mr. Suwareh. April 10th and 11th, 2000, were 2 days of infamy in the history of the Gambia. These youngsters exercising their human right, they weren't fighting for themselves. You were fighting for all Gambia. But what is it that happened? Lives destroyed, a significant part of a generation lost. The victims of these 2 days weren't war veterans who would be supported by the state or compensated. No, the consequences of what happened have left them, families, have left them to themselves and to charities, maybe individuals or organizations to help them. This is not the way to handle young future generations for the country. I'm sorry that you endured so much, but don't be too emotional. That's okay, that's human about it. Life goes on. You are pursuing careers and other things that should help. But the suffering that you endured is not a good commentary on our country. And for it to be perpetrated on you guys by agents of the state is unpardonable. Yes, that must be met with impunity. Anyway, I don't have personally any questions to ask you. You've said it all and done very well and articulated extremely well the circumstances of your suffering since the 10th and the 11th of April. Commissioners, if you have any questions, please indicate. Otherwise, if you have any closing remarks, Mr. Suwareh, please go ahead and make them now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those very comforting words. And I could not have agreed with you more. But I have to warn you first, though, how much time do I have? Otherwise, I may hold you guys in prison for a while.
Go
So
ahead,
how much
exercise
time
your
do I have?
judgment. We trust you. We owe it to you to give you the time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'll do my best to be reasonable. There is so much to be said that can be said in so little time. But first of all, and most importantly, I want the government, and I'm urging the government of the day to please come out and do the right thing immediately for the suffering victims of April 10 and 11, and indeed all the victims of the murderous regime of Yahya Jammeh. What should have been done for the likes of Yusufa, the list goes on, should have been done long time ago. It's almost too late for them now, and I hate to say that, but that's the reality. Let them please come out and try to remedy and right wrongs on behalf of these victims. I do not hold them accountable in any way. But now that they're the government of the day, they are indeed responsible for doing the right thing. So please, by all means, don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait until the end of the TRC. These individuals are suffering and they need help, and they needed this help yesterday. It's long overdue. That's that would be the best thing I think and say and call for. Um, I also continue to pray for the young soul that were lost on that day. I hope their soul rests in eternal peace. Um, as far as DRC is the right thing to do, and I'm very happy that the government embarked on this. It's very important. You cannot solve a problem holistically without understanding the depth, the scope, the nature of the problem. So it's an important step. Um, but as a country, if anything, with this unique opportunity, um, this is probably the most two important things I probably could talk about. One is the rule of law, which is very related to what happened to us, the victims of April 10 and 11, and the countless victims of Yahya Jammeh and his government. Um, the TRC is a is but a component of the rule of law as far as Gambia is concerned and its respective history. Um, we all hope that there will never be an incident like such ever in our history, so that no mothers or fathers would relive such a horrible experience. So to prevent that from happening, as a country, especially our government, they need to make sure they invest in rule of law. After Yahya Jammeh left at this point in time, by now we should at least have or almost have a police academy with adequate resources to train would-be or potential policemen, give them the adequate training that they need, give them the adequate resources they need. That way, before you give them a deadly arm to go out and police citizens, especially in our case children, they will be they will have the required training and the resources to deal with the students appropriately. Unless and until this is done, in my opinion, we risk reliving our unfortunate history. And it's evident that since after Yahya Jammeh left, there are some incidents that reminisce of April 10 and 11. So Yahya Jammeh is a monster. He was a huge problem for the country. But he wasn't the only problem, you know. So to completely get rid of the cancer in that country, rule of law have to be taken care of accordingly and appropriately. In defense of the security officers, they also have to be well paid as well. You can't have ill-trained police officers, ill-equipped police officers, and give them a deadly arm to go and perform the operation obligation of enforcing rule of law when they do not have the prerequisite training and resources. That is a recipe for disaster, and that is a part of that's the problem. That's a part of the problem that happened in April 10 and 11. So to avoid that, these are some of my suggestions. I believe the government should do and take care of. Um, we can't always focus on effects to avoid repeating unfortunate history or incidents like April 10 and 11. We have to focus on the root causes. I think that is the most important thing. Um, and even the development of that country, we will never develop or achieve what we aspire to as a country if we don't, if the government, if we as a society do not have the proper law and enforcement in that country. It's a must. In the absence of proper law and order in that country will never develop because of the consequences it comes with. In my limited wisdom also, I would suggest the police, since their primary function is law, I think it's best for them to be under the Ministry of Justice instead of the Ministry of Interior. I think they will be in better hands being managed by professional legal experts instead of perhaps what I would call professional politicians. And the other part is making sure the Ministry of Justice are given the adequate resources. That way, the kind of rule of law, the kind of rule of law that we all want, which is in the best interest for everybody, for the country, we will get. So on that area, that's what I'll have to say. Um, if I have a few more minutes, I would like to do a little bit about the importance of education to develop a country. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to be very arrogant.
Please go on.
Okay, thank you. The other important, the other important prerequisite for the development of our country, the Gambia, is education. Um, most of us, if not all Gambians, we want a better Gambia, a developed Gambia, like the signing city on the hill. That's what we all want. We may disagree about how we go about it, but that's what we all want. But at the end of the day, regardless of how we see fit to obtain that objective, rule of law and education is a must. We have to get those two right. If we do not get those two right, no matter how a national development plan or a project policy document, no matter how brilliant it is, it will never be fulfilled. It will manifest into reality because, especially in that part of the world, in Africa, we are not going to develop if we don't develop our own country for ourselves. How are you going to develop if you don't have the prerequisite to implement the development? You know, looking back when Gambia, as a kid, as a young man, I would hear often, "Oh, Gambia, we don't have natural resources. We don't have natural resources. We don't have oil and diamonds like other countries." And I couldn't disagree with that further. Um, I think that's a very misguided notion, and I'm mentioning it here because it's very common to hear, at least when I was there. The number one and most important natural resources is human resources. So, and for our country to get the human resources, it has to come through education. And I hope there are great programs by the government and very soon that will be implemented so that we can develop the adequate human resources that would enable the development of that country. Um, Arguably, for me, I think we are a million times better not even having natural resources like some people would say oil, diamond, you name it, human resources. You know, we all know countries like Singapore, what natural resources do they have as far as what's on the ground? Hardly any, but they do have the most important natural resources, which is human resources. And you're not going to have that if you don't have the adequate, the appropriate education system. I hoped and I wished the University of the Gambia um, within very short period of time will get all the resources that they need. That way, when you go to the university, faculties, especially when it comes to STEM, you go in their labs and you'll feel like they have all the resources needed to develop the prerequisite talent and knowledge that will develop that country. With that, I hope even University of the Gambia could become one of the best universities in Africa. So it's not a coincidence that the more developed, the more educated a nation is, the more developed they are. It's not a coincidence. So with that, I will end my note, and I thank you all for your kind attention. And I would like to commend the important work that you guys are doing. And I would make a quick suggestion that at the end of the day, when you guys are done with your very important mission, I hope that the government would also institute an independent oversight committee to make sure that your recommendations are implemented to the letter. It will not become another report, a recommendation that is laying in the decks of a person and waiting in dust, being covered by dust, like some of the commission's report. Thank you very much. And if I may have said something inappropriate, I apologize as a result. I'll blame it on the raw emotions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suwareh, for those very wise words indeed, and thanks Emma enormously for thoughtful suggestions and her remarks as well. And thank you again for coming to testify before the TRRC. We will resume our proceedings tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.